what it means to be a marketer here in the 21st century.
Yeah.
We are going to be cutting through all of that tactical noise, the spam, the hustle, the obsession with tracking every single click to find a true north, a real strategy.
And we've navigated a pretty comprehensive stack of sources that detail a more ethical and effective, and I think surprisingly, a more generous approach to marketing.
It feels like necessary work because the old map, it's just useless now, isn't it?
It's completely useless. We're moving away from that mass interruption model that, it defined the entire 20th century.
Right.
An era where you could just buy your way into the public's mind.
And now we're shifting toward a strategy that's based on genuine targeted change.
Exactly. The sources we're looking at, they promise a foundational compass for solving the big problems. Things like spreading ideas, making a real impact, improving the culture around you, rather than just, handing you a list of cheap, short-sighted tactics.
And the key themes we're going to unpack, they're fascinating because they really demand a shift in mindset.
A huge one.
It's all about acknowledging that traditional mass media approach is, it's dead. And we have to embrace this focus on highly specific, permission-based communication.
And crucially, we have to talk about the importance of the smallest viable market.
The SVM.
The SVM. And how to generate that forward motion using things like social tension, status, affiliation, not just fear or, a huge ad spend.
So if you're listening and you take one initial insight away from this, what should it be?
I think it's this. The internet feels infinite. It feels like this vast free media playground where you should be able to just shout your message and be heard by everyone.
Right. Total freedom.
But the reality, and the sources are so clear on this, is that the digital landscape is actually a billion tiny whispers.
I love that phrase.
It's perfect. And it means you cannot, for any amount of money, simply steal attention anymore. Attention is the most expensive commodity on earth, and we have to fundamentally shift how we think about earning it.
That's the core realization, isn't it? We have to move away from what the sources call the industrialized selfish same old.
The industrialized selfish same old.
Spamming, hustling for visibility, buying likes, obsessively tracking clicks on content that, frankly, the person writing it is probably secretly embarrassed by.
Yeah, that's it. The game has changed completely.
Okay, let's unpack this shift. Let's start with section 1. Escaping the industrialized same old. So when we really look back at the origins of modern advertising, the sources remind us that the whole system was built on a very, very specific economic model.
Interruption,
exactly. Media like television, radio.
Yeah.
They were, in essence, invented and developed just to house the ads.
That was their purpose. Their entire business model was predicated on the idea that if you buy a spot, you are guaranteed the mass captive attention of millions of people.
And that foundation, that historical foundation, created this expectation that marketers, they deserve attention just because they paid for the channel.
Right. You bought your way into the living room, and, it worked beautifully for 80 years.
It really did.
Because attention was aggregated. It was scarce. You know where to find people.
But the
internet just destroyed that aggregation. While the digital world is the largest medium in history, it's also the most fractured. There's no longer a mass. There are only niches.
A billion tiny whispers.
Exactly. And that means the era of buying attention cheaply or even just expecting it as a right is completely over.
And the sources give such clear, almost painful examples of this industrialized, selfish, same old. These are tactics that still persist, but at the end of the day, just waste time and resources.
Oh, they're everywhere. Think about the desperation we still see every single day.
Like what?
Well, the classic playbook, right? Paying some dubious firm to get you on the first page of Google through, manipulative keyword stuffing.
Oh.
Or relentlessly spamming every influencer you can find with a generic press release. Or worse, a link to your Kickstarter campaign as the deadline is looming.
That one feels very familiar. Or what about the internal obsession with metrics?
Oh, that's a huge one.
The idea of just obsessively tracking click-through rates on this low-quality, churned-out blog content that provides zero value.
Right.
Simply because the internal QCI demands a certain number of clicks this week.
And it becomes this vicious cycle where the quality just degrades and degrades in pursuit of the metric.
Yeah.
And then there's the core emotional mistake. lowering your price.
Because a few customers complain.
Right. A few people complained your rates were too high, so you panic and lower them, but you do it without actually improving the value. You don't change the positioning.
It's just a race to the bottom.
All of these are just examples of hustling, interrupting, treating the marketplace like the zero-sum game where you're just trying to steal a few seconds of attention. And the sources insist this is not only ineffective, it's spiritually draining.
And a total waste of business capital.
Oh, total waste.
So if we're getting off that merry-go-round, if we stop the spamming, what is the viable long-term path?
Well, it sounds like we need to redefine marketing from being a short-term transaction mechanism
Right.
to being a persistent engine of change.
An engine of change.
That's precisely it. Modern marketing, at its best, is the act of making change happen. And this requires a complete inversion of the traditional marketer's posture.
How so?
It requires two crucial traits that are, well, they're often missing in those high-pressure sales environments.
Which are?
Curiosity and humility.
Curiosity and humility. That feels so countercultural for a field that's often characterized by bold declarations and, aggressive sales tactics. Why is humility so foundational here?
Because the professional marketer has to first embrace the humility that people are absolutely not eager to pay with their attention.
It's their most valuable resource.
It's a non-renewable, finite resource in their day. You can't demand it. You can't trick them into giving it. You have to earn it moment by moment.
And how do you earn it?
Attention has to be voluntarily traded for something they genuinely need, something that provides immediate, undeniable value, or because they deeply trust the source of the message.
This reminds me of that powerful lock and key analogy from the source material.
Yes.
Instead of seeing the entire mass market as this one giant entity and you're just trying every conceivable lock with a universal key.
Which never works.
Right. The generous marketer starts with specificity.
They find this specific person, the lock, who has a specific problem they're trying to solve. And then, and this is the generous part, they create a bespoke key just for that lock.
One that's tailored so perfectly.
So perfectly that the audience member will happily trade their attention, their time, or their money for it.
And this reframes the whole ethical relationship, doesn't it?
Completely.
Because if the solution you offer is truly valuable, you're not stealing if you keep sending your message. In fact, the sources argue if you stop making it available, you're actually withholding a significant benefit from them.
Exactly. If the customer understands what's on offer and they choose not to engage, then fine. It's not for them. And that's okay.
But if the solution is clearly beneficial, if it addresses an acute need, then the marketer's job is just to make that exchange possible and obvious.
Which brings us to the lifeguard principle.
Right, which ties urgency to that obvious solution.
If you show up with a life buoy for a person who is actively drowning, you don't need to run a sophisticated ad campaign to explain the benefits of buoyant PVC plastic.
No, the need is apparent.
The drowning person instantly understands what is at stake. The acute need overcomes the inertia of the status quo. Your marketing doesn't have to persuade them they have a problem. Their current reality is already doing that.
So your job is only to be the specific, obvious, and immediate solution.
That's it. And this profound focus on specificity is the non-negotiable step that takes us straight into the smallest viable market.
Okay, so let's really unpack this core concept of the smallest viable market, the SVM. Because, as you noted, it feels completely counterintuitive.
It does.
Especially for businesses that are obsessed with scaling fast. We're taught to maximize reach, get in front of as many eyeballs as possible. But the sources argue that focusing on the smallest viable group is the only sustainable way to get true, lasting growth.
It sounds like a paradox, but it's mathematically sound. Specificity, in this context, is described as a form of bravery.
Why bravery?
Because when you target a narrow, defined market, the result is crystal clear. It's undeniable. It worked or it didn't.
There's no hiding.
You can't hide a failure by claiming, oh, we just didn't reach enough people, or, well, it's a brand-building exercise. Specificity demands accountability.
And accountability means you commit your resources where they actually matter the most.
Yeah.
This brings us to that powerful analogy of the purple dye.
Yes, I love this one. Imagine you have a teaspoon of the most extraordinary, brightest purple dye you could create. That's your product, your service.
Okay.
If you drop that teaspoon into the entire ocean,
Nothing happens.
Nobody notices. The dye is extraordinary, but the canvas is just too vast. Your effort, however brilliant, is diluted to the point of invisibility. And that is the fate of almost every product that's aimed at the mass market.
But if you take that exact same teaspoon of extraordinary dye and drop it into, say, a large swimming pool.
Your smallest viable market.
Right.
Then the change is permanent, it's dramatic, and it's vividly purple.
And this commitment, it requires walking away from the ocean.
You have to accept that you will never be able to serve everyone. And you know what? That should be incredibly comforting. It should be liberating.
Because the mission isn't to be average for everyone.
No, the mission is to be specific about who you are seeking to serve and precisely what change you are trying to make for them.
But wait, let's play devil's advocate for a second. If we commit to the smallest viable market, aren't we inherently running the risk of niche market starvation?
Yeah.
How do we ensure that it's viable?
That's where the V in SVM comes in. Viability means that the group is specific enough that you can effectively reach them and solve their problem, but it's also large enough that their combined transactions can sustain and grow your business.
So if the niche is too small to pay the rent.
It's not viable. The bravery is in choosing a small, viable pool and making the change permanent, rather than just dissipating your energy trying to color the entire ocean. And this requires truly seeing the audience, not just counting them.
Which the sources illustrate so beautifully with the case study of Vision Spring.
A fantastic example. They tackled a biological problem that had these profound economic implications.
Presbyopia, right?
Exactly. The normal age-related loss of close-up vision usually starts around age 50. And because of increased global lifespans, active workers in developing nations, weavers, mechanics, jewelers, they were being forced to retire or stop working just because they couldn't see the detail required for their craft.
A problem that didn't really exist generations ago when lifespans were shorter.
Not at this scale. And their strategy was revolutionary because it totally ignored the mass market and focused entirely on the local economic reality. They produced these attractive, high-quality reading glasses cheaply.
For about $2 a pair.
Right. And then they sold them for $3 in villages using local traveling salespeople.
And that $1 difference, that covered distribution, local talent, and sustainable growth.
Exactly. The innovation wasn't the product itself. I mean, glasses have existed forever. It was the deep, empathic understanding of the audience's worldview and their reality.
So tell us about that key insight they had during the observation phase in the village.
Yeah.
This is where the humility of the marketer really comes into play.
Well, the Western marketers, they initially assumed the issue was just affordability or maybe a lack of awareness.
A rational assumption.
A very rational one. But their observations on the ground revealed three crucial things that just disproved their initial projections. One, based on age, the people needed glasses. That's simple biology. That's the need. Two, they weren't wearing them. An obvious access issue.
Right.
But the third one, this was the key market indicator. Most of the men had visible rupees in the pockets of their sheer traditional Indian work shirts.
So they had the money.
They had disposable cash access.
That one detail is huge. It shows that affordability wasn't the only blocker. The distribution model, the social narrative around the product, that was just as critical.
Precisely. They weren't just selling glasses, they were selling a return to economic viability, and it was being delivered by a trusted local source.
Which leads to this stark contrast with the Western perspective on consumption.
A completely different worldview. For most Western shoppers, buying something new is, a fun risk. It's a thrill. It's entertainment.
But for the villagers, buying something new, especially a medical device, might be seen as a threat.
A risky investment that could jeopardize the family budget or, invite ridicule from their neighbors.
So an elaborate Western-style optician's experience, with all the choices, the mirrors, trying on used frames, that would have been actively counterproductive.
Completely. Because it just didn't align with the customer's deeply ingrained belief system.
Which proves the point. The marketer must abandon their own narrative if it isn't working for the customer.
Because the customer's worldview, the noise in their head, their cultural anxieties, their beliefs about status, it is always, always stronger than the story the marketer tells. And this is why the entire field of microeconomics struggles when it deals with actual human beings.
You're referencing the flaw in the concept of the rational agent.
I am. Microeconomics assumes that the rational agent acts consistently, making decisions based solely on available information, costs, and benefits. The sources state this assertion is, well, it's demonstrably false in real human decision-making.
We act based on our narratives, our status drives.
Our deeply held, often irrational beliefs about what people like us do.
And the most tragic, highly public example of this rational failure has to be the JCPenney disaster.
Oh, starting in 2011. A perfect case study. Ron Johnson, coming off this incredible success as the architect of Apple's retail store.
A luxury high-margin retailer.
Right. He takes over as CEO of JCPenney and immediately tries to apply his rational Apple worldview to their customer base.
And Johnson saw the endless carousel of sales, coupons, and clearance events as, disrespectful to the customer.
He did. He operated from his worldview that a quality retailer should exhibit quiet, mutual respect and simply offer consistently low, fair prices. So he eliminated all the constant discounting, all the urgent sales.
Which, if we were truly rational agents, we should have welcomed. A lower, consistent price is objectively better than relying on coupon clipping.
Objectively, yes. But sales plummeted by over 50% almost immediately.
Why?
Because he abandoned the customer's actual identity. JCPenney's true fans, they weren't shopping for mutual respect or consistent pricing.
They were there for the sport.
They were there for the sport of bargain hunting, the thrill of the win, the urgency of the sale. That was their game, their worldview. Johnson tried to sell them this high-status Apple narrative, and they rejected it utterly.
But because it didn't match their desire for affiliation within that bargain hunter tribe.
He tried to change their identity instead of serving the one they already embraced. And that is a massive takeaway. You cannot change the culture of your existing tribe overnight just because you think your idea of better is more rational or efficient.
Better isn't up to you.
Exactly. Better is defined by the customer's beliefs, their dreams, their desires, their specific irrational noise in their head. We have to stop judging their behavior and start serving it.
So better isn't a linear comparison.
Not at all. It's only better if the customer values the specific characteristics that the price point or the urgency or the positioning represent, like status or environmental care, or just the ability to brag about a great deal.
And this deep understanding of human drives, these internal, non-rational motivators, this is what unlocks the next phase. Understanding the role of status and tension in driving our behavior. Okay, so if we reject this idea of the purely rational agent, and we accept that people operate based on their identity and their worldview, what is the actual engine driving their behavior?
The sources point to two main interconnected forces. The desire to fit in.
People like us do things like this.
Exactly. And the perception of status, which really breaks down into affiliation and dominance.
This is the map of human decision-making, isn't it?
It is. And once you start seeing status roles, you see them everywhere. Status is always relative. It's our position or our perception of our position in a hierarchy, whether that hierarchy is explicit or implied.
And the fundamental desire is to either change our status, move up, or move in, or protect our current status.
And that drives nearly every choice we make, from what job we take to what coffee we buy.
The sources use the opening scene of The Godfather as this pure, flawless illustration of the clash of status roles and the tension it generates.
It's a perfect example. We see Amerigo Bonacera, the low-status undertaker, coming to visit Don Corleone, who is at the absolute apex of the status heap, on his daughter's wedding day.
And tradition states the Don must grant any favor on that day, positioning him as this benevolent patriarch.
But Bonacera makes an immediate and critical error. He describes how his daughter was assaulted, and then he demands violence and punishment for the assailants rather than asking for justice as a favor.
And then he makes it worse.
So much worse.
Yeah.
He offers to pay the Don for the violence, saying, "How much shall I pay you?"
And by offering money, he's trying to transform the Don from a respected community pillar into what? A common gangster?
A low-status hoodlum for hire. This act instantly raises Bonacera's perceived status by insulting and diminishing the Dons. And the tension in that scene is it's enormous.
Because the Don cannot possibly grant the favor and maintain his most valuable asset, which is his high social status.
He can't. The Don even says, "You insult my family." And the tension only breaks when Bonacera is forced to retreat.
He bows. He kisses the ring.
Pledges fealty, begs for the favor, and returns to his low-status supplicant role. It's an exchange that has nothing to do with money and everything to do with one's place in the hierarchy.
So the marketer's job is to recognize that the product or service acts as a signifier of the status their customer is either acquiring or protecting.
That's it. And if we look at this in a broader market sense, we have two primary status worldviews that the marketer has to identify in their smallest viable market: dominion and affiliation.
Okay, let's define those. Dominion is
the vertical worldview. It's all about above or below, winners and losers, scarcity, competition. It's asking who has more power, or signaling This is mine, not your.
And the source notes that a company like Uber, in their early days, built their entire brand by sending these dominant signals.
They did. Through their contentious relationships with the taxi industry, aligning with users who respond best to a narrative of winning and disruption.
And affiliation is the horizontal contrast to that.
Right. That's the horizontal worldview. Insiders and outsiders being in sync, being part of a shared movement where abundance is welcome. It's about fitting in with people like us.
So a community-focused brand or a figure like Tom Hanks?
Tom Hanks is a perfect example. People perceive him as caring deeply about whether we can all get along. The marketer has to identify which narrative their smallest viable market responds to, dominion or affiliation, because the customer's worldview is always the stronger force.
So once we understand that status is the primary engine, we can then manipulate forward motion using tension.
Exactly. And that relies on the difference between a pattern match and a pattern interrupt.
A pattern match is easy. It's business as usual.
Right. It requires no cognitive energy, no change. If you buy a new brand of cereal that happens to be on sale, you are merely matching your existing pattern of consuming cereal. No risk, no tension.
But a pattern interrupt that requires a jolt.
A jolt. It diverts energy, forcing the individual to stop their habitual, fast, unconscious decision-making and engage their slow, deliberate thinking.
So things like hiring a gardener for the first time.
Or securing a $5,000 donation from someone who usually only gives $100. Or switching from an iPhone to an Android after 10 years, those actions require undoing an established, comfortable pattern.
And tension is the fuel for that interrupt.
It is. And it's not necessarily fear, but it's the promise that we can successfully get through the fear of change to the other side and achieve a better state or a better status.
Like when a colleague says, "You're missing out. We're doing this cool thing without you."
That creates a focused social tension that can overcome years of inertia.
Look at the example of Slack.
Incredible example. Initially, Slack was a pattern match for early adopters, new software for people who like new software. But the leap from being a niche tool to a dominant enterprise player came from giving users a tool to create a pattern interrupt peer-to-peer within their own companies.
How did they manage that internal interrupt?
The internal marketing for Slack wasn't about features, it was about social tension. The implied message driven by those early adopters became, every day you're not on Slack. People at work are talking about you behind your back, and you're missing crucial information.
Which creates immediate social pressure and status anxiety.
And the only way to relieve that tension is through forward motion you sign in. That horizontal, peer-driven transmission built a multi-billion-dollar company because the tension was baked right into the usage.
The powerful realization. The tension doesn't have to come from the marketer. It can come from the tribe itself.
It should.
And then there's the incredible Las Vegas casino effect, which shows how tension can degrade the status quo.
Right. So when newer, fancier, more dominant casinos opened in Vegas, their sheer existence created tension for people who were perfectly happy with their old, rundown favorites.
So the customers started asking themselves this crucial status-related question.
Am I still the sort of person who goes to this outdated, rundown casino?
The fancier alternative didn't have to advertise directly to them.
No, it just degraded their experience at their former favorite place simply by existing and setting a new status bar. The only way to relieve that internal tension, that nagging status anxiety, is through forward motion, trying the new thing.
So the lesson is, if your solution doesn't create significant tension for the status quo is likely to survive.
And your idea will be ignored. Tension, strategically applied, is the essential tool of change.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about pricing. Most businesses spend their time trying to optimize price based on, cost plus margin.
The spreadsheet approach.
Right. But the sources insist that price is not just math. Price is a story, and it's a potent marketing and status tool.
It's maybe the loudest signal you send about your product and the status of the person who buys it. It fundamentally shapes expectations and has to align with the extremes you claim in your positioning.
So if you claim to be a luxury brand, you have to charge a luxury price.
You have to. If you try to position yourself as premium but you charge a low price, you send this deeply confusing, untrustworthy signal.
But isn't a lower price objectively better for the customer? Shouldn't that build trust?
Counterintuitively, lowering the price often doesn't make you more trusted. It can do the opposite. It can suggest desperation or lower quality. The sources remind us that sometimes the high cost of participation in cash, in reputation, in effort, causes people to actively invent a feeling of trust just to justify their investment.
Cognitive dissonance at work. The brain has to resolve that high-cost commitment with a positive emotion.
Precisely. If I spend $1,000 on a course, my brain needs a survival mechanism to justify that large, potentially risky investment. It's easier to invent the belief that the instructor is trustworthy and the material is invaluable than it is to admit I may have just wasted $1,000.
So trust in this case follows the investment.
It follows the commitment.
Yeah.
And the Pinnacon Resort example perfectly illustrates this idea of price as a strategic story rather than just a revenue generator.
Tell us about that.
The resort has Fiona's Ice Cream Shop, which charges less than $3 Canadian for these enormous, delicious waffle cones. A rational MBA team would instantly suggest raising that price to $8 to maximize profit on the cone itself.
Of course they would.
But the resort management knew that the low price was irresistible.
So the ice cream cone isn't a commodity sale, it's a strategic asset.
It creates magic, it creates memory and this profound energy. It turns the resort into a destination that people will drive hours to visit, not just for the room, but for the affordable delight of that cone. They understood they weren't in the business of selling ice cream cones. They were in the business of creating delight and using the cone as a generous beacon.
A beacon to drive traffic and long-term connection to the overall resort experience, which is where the real revenue is.
That's where it is, and this leads directly to the paradox of free things. Free ideas are far more likely to spread, like the ice cream recipe or a great song, but you still have to pay the bills.
So how do you reconcile the spread of free ideas with the necessity of profit?
The sources offer a very clear solution. You combine two offerings. You must have free ideas that spread. The podcast, the recipe, the hit song on the radio, the useful content, and you must have expensive expressions of those ideas that are worth paying for.
So the chef gives away her revolutionary chili recipe for free. It spreads far and wide, building her reputation and her tribe.
But she charges $24 for the specific pasta dish served on specific china at her restaurant. That includes the atmosphere, the service, the presentation, and the status of dining there.
The song on the radio is free, but the ticket to the concert is $84.
And the china and the concert ticket are essential high-cost souvenirs of the free, valuable idea.
So the free content builds awareness, permission, and trust, creating the platform from which you can sell the expensive, high-value expression.
It's a beautifully balanced ecosystem.
It is. Now let's move into how these messages are received, through the lens of semiotics.
Yes, semiotics is the language of symbols, flags, and shorthand that communicate meaning beyond the literal function of the product.
I think of the flashing lights at an arena concert. They don't change the sound quality at all, but they instantly communicate that you were at a major, expensive arena rock concert, not some basement gig.
It's pure signal.
Pure signal.
Exactly. Semiotics is crucial because professionals design things that other people will like, using a look and feel of vernacular that reminds them of their sort of magic or their tribe.
Which is why a fashion ad in Vogue uses entirely different fonts and colors than an ad in Field & Stream.
Because the designer needs to ensure the signal fits the specific tribe they are trying to attract.
And one of the most insightful examples of semiotics in action is the non-benign use of the Nigerian spam filter.
Brilliant.
The deliberate inclusion of misspellings and glaring grammatical errors in those scam emails.
It's a brilliant, if nefarious, filter mechanism. The scammer isn't incompetent. They deliberately include those signals to the skeptical, well-informed audience. The message being sent semiotically is, this is a scam, you are too clever for this, go away.
Why on earth would a scammer want to drive away potential victims?
To save time. The goal is to maximize efficiency by filtering out the savvy, skeptical people at the very beginning. If the email only attracts the greedy and the gullible, those who ignore the obvious signals in pursuit of a fast, unrealistic reward, the scammer has pre-qualified their pool.
They'd rather lose the skeptic on the first line than waste 2 weeks on them.
Exactly. It's an incredibly efficient use of negative semiotics.
That's a powerful lesson in audience filtering. It's about optimizing for the right kind of commitment. And we see similar status signifiers in physical products, like the seemingly functionless flares around SUV wheels.
Or the tiny flares on Cadillac taillights. They're pure status flags people fly. These details have no real aerodynamic or protective function, but they remain because they send a message about the status of the car and the driver.
Like driving gloves still having the hole for a big wristwatch.
Long after big watches became uncommon, The utility is gone, but the symbol remains, defining membership in a certain high-status group.
And all of this careful, specific signaling leads us back to the ultimate asset that replaces that rented mass audience: permission.
Permission is the foundation of the modern ethical marketing model. It is the privilege of delivering anticipated, personal, and relevant messages to people who genuinely want to get them without having to rely on a middleman.
No Facebook algorithm, no TV station.
None of it.
And the sources offer this clear, crucial test for real permission. It's not just having someone's email address.
No. The test is, if you stop showing up, are people concerned? Do they ask where you went?
That's the definition of genuine enrollment. The audience perceives your absence as a loss of value or status.
And we see this powerful asset in action with the case study of Tumabasa and the Rap Caviar playlist at Spotify.
So in 2015, Tumabasa takes over the editorial direction of Rap Caviar. And through sheer consistency, expertise, and generous curation, he grew it to an audience of 9 million subscribers in 3 years.
That list became the most important asset in the entire music business. It wasn't just a playlist, it was a permission asset, more important than any traditional radio station or magazine.
When Basa featured a new artist, they essentially became a superstar.
He elevated artists like Cardi B to stardom. The fact that Spotify owns that permission asset, that attention and enrollment, drives commerce and changes the landscape of hit music every single Friday morning.
It demonstrates the power of owning the relationship. And if you stop doing the generous, curated work that earned that attention,
the asset disappears because the permission is non-transferable and it has to be continuously re-earned.
So, we've successfully targeted our smallest viable market. We understand their worldview, their status drivers, we've earned their permission. But how do we ensure this approach survives the natural short attention spans of the market and our own internal boredom?
That's the real challenge, and it requires strict adherence to the hierarchy of decision-making. We have to clearly distinguish between goals, strategy, and tactics.
Okay, break that down. The goal is
the destination, where you want to go. The strategy is the umbrella approach, the overarching method for getting to that goal. And tactics are the countless, changeable, day-to-day steps you take.
And that distinction is vital because it affects organizational endurance. If a tactic fails, say a specific social media campaign, you change it instantly.
Instantly. But if a strategy fails, you change it much less often because changing strategy requires shifting the entire culture of the organization.
And the contrast between Coca-Cola and Patagonia illustrates this beautifully.
It really does. Coke's goal is simple and aggressive.
Right.
More people drink more Coke. Their strategy: run massive ads to persuade the mass market that Coke is an essential part of the culture and that everyone is drinking it.
And the content of those ads, the seasonal campaigns, the celebrity endorsements, those are just the tactics.
Which change constantly.
Patagonia's goal, though, is entirely different. It's highly specific. Get a tiny group of dedicated outdoor enthusiasts to care about the environment and express that care by wearing Patagonia gear.
And their strategy is unshakable. Redefine environmental impact and quality, creating a clear boundary between insiders, those who care, and outsiders, the mass consumer. Their tactics include everything from recycling clothes to specific store placement in environmental hubs.
Sustainable materials choices.
Even telling customers not to buy a jacket. When a tactic fails, say a specific material choice proves unsustainable, they don't abandon the core strategy they've held for over 30 years.
And that persistence is so intrinsically tied to trust. The sources explain that people don't internalize information just because they read it once. They remember what they do. And we associate trust with events and stories that happen again and again.
The familiar is normal, and the normal is trusted.
Which brings up a major internal organizational failure. Marketers get bored with their own story.
So quickly. They see their message every day and assume the audience does too. But there's a real significant dip, a psychological gap between when the marketer gets bored and when the audience actually registers the message.
Which is why that famous advertising maxim holds. Don't change them when your employees are tired of them.
Change them when your accountant is tired of them. You have to persist long past your own point of exhaustion.
And this need for frequency is vital when you're navigating how ideas spread through a culture. Which brings us to the Rogers curve.
Yes, the standard deviation curve of human behavior. This curve is essential knowledge for any modern marketer. It shows that in any population, most people cluster around the average. They are conservative, they seek validation, they are not seeking novelty.
So the marketer has to focus only on the 15 to 16% on the far left side.
The neophiliacs or the early adopters?
These are the people who are addicted to the new. They enjoy the tension of this might not work, and they derive status and pleasure from bragging about their early discoveries to their friends.
They are the only people who will give a completely new, unproven idea a chance.
But focusing solely on the neophiliacs creates that fatal problem identified by Jeff Moore, the chasm.
The chasm is the fatal gap between the enthusiastic neophiliacs who create the initial hype and the conservative mass market who fundamentally disdains that hype and will not trust a product simply because it's new.
So the early adopters create the hype, but when that hype hits the conservative majority, it can't compare to the initial excitement, and you get the trough of disillusionment.
You lose momentum when the neophiliacs get bored and the mass market disdains the idea as a flash in the pan. You absolutely need a bridge across that chasm.
And this is where the strategy of persistence becomes mandatory, exemplified by Zig Ziglar.
The legendary pots and pans door-to-door salesman from the 1960s.
Most of the salesmen in his company would visit a town, they'd make the easy sales to the neophiliacs and the enthusiasts, the low-hanging fruit, and then they'd flee to the next town when those easy sales dried up.
Ziglar had a different, persistent strategy. He moved in. He booked a room for weeks at a time, and he stayed. He understood that the conservative majority needed more frequency and more social proof.
He kept organizing multiple demonstration dinners, repeatedly engaging the middle-of-the-curve customers 5, 6, or 7 times over the course of a month.
Which is the precise frequency and social repetition a conservative customer needs before they're willing to risk their status or their money on a new purchase.
He built a human bridge across the local chasm.
He did. He survived those initial days or weeks with no sales because the volume after crossing that chasm, converting the conservative, trusting majority, would more than make up for the initial investment in persistence.
The lesson is clear. The easy sales aren't the important ones.
No. The persistent investment in converting the resistant middle is the difference between niche popularity and true market dominance.
Now, connecting this persistence back to the sheer scale of the internet, the long tail allows for these highly obscure products.
Chip carving books, drone music albums.
The April Fool's Passover birthday Easter shirt. You can sell 4 of those shirts globally.
Exactly. And while the internet makes these long-tail products possible, you can't survive by selling just one obscure thing to a tiny scattered audience. The strategy for viability is to divide the market into many different curves.
And create many small short heads.
Many small hits that unite specific microtribes. The marketer should seek to create not one massive hit, but dozens of microhits, each connecting a highly specific tribe.
So it's a portfolio approach where specificity unlocks scale.
Because each small hit is a profound success within its smallest viable market.
Finally, as we persistently build these movements, how do we effectively lead them? The sources bring in Marshall Ganz's 3-step narrative for action.
A framework designed specifically to drive change in reluctant people. It's invaluable for any marketer trying to move a tribe across the chasm.
Step 1, story of self.
Establishing standing and credibility. This is personal. You share a transformation. I used to be X, paralyzed by fear or inertia, and then I discovered Y, which changed my life. It's generosity. It allows others to see themselves in your journey.
Step 2, story of us.
Defining the tribe and its purpose. Why are we alike? What do we share? The real win wasn't just the success, but the friendships I made. Old friends like you and new ones who share this commitment. This builds the kernel of the tribe and sets the high standard of affiliation.
And finally, step 3, story of now.
The urgent call to action, emphasizing commitment and shared risk. And this requires the leader to go first. I called ahead and they've reserved 2 spots for us in the marathon, or I've reserved some rental skates for you. We do this together now.
It's the difference between saying, I lost weight, you should too, and saying, we share this goal, and I've already taken the risk of setting up the first step for you today, so we start now.
The tribe does not belong to the leader. The leader has to gain empathy, understand the narrative, and constantly serve the members. The ultimate goal is for the tribe to miss you deeply if you left.
And that ultimately is the highest achievement of generous, specific, modern marketing.
Building something so essential, so aligned with their worldview and their status goals, that your absence would be felt as a profound loss of both affiliation and upward status within the tribe.
Which brings us to our final synthesis, #outro. We started this deep dive looking for a compass, a way to escape the industrialized, selfish same old of spamming and interruption. And what we found is that marketing isn't about faking authenticity or running clever ad copy.
Not at all. It's the generous and audacious work of finding people worth serving, having the humility to understand their deeply held, often irrational worldview, and then saying, I see a better alternative for people like us. Come with me.
It demands the bravery of specificity, choosing the smallest viable market and ignoring the noisy crowd. It requires focusing effort on the few whales who will fund the enterprise.
And using tools like status and tension, rather than fear or discounts, to carry that vision across the chasm with painful persistence. The job is to make change happen by giving a specific group of people a new, improved, and desirable status role.
And that leads us to the final provocative thought for you to consider, especially if you are building a product or service that your early adopters are already loving and spreading the word about.
We often underestimate the power of status and affiliation in driving those initial decisions.
So ask yourself this.
What narrative are they telling themselves about their improved status, their new identity after using your product? And who specifically are they telling that story to?
Understanding that internal horizontal status narrative is the key to unlocking the next level of voluntary self-sustaining spread. Until next time.